Stop being patient and ask yourself, how do I accomplish my 10-year plan in 6 months? You will probably fail, but you will be a lot further ahead of the person who simply accepted it was going to take 10 years. One of the really tough things is figuring out what questions to ask. Once you've figured out the questions, the answer is relatively easy. If you're trying to create a company, it's like baking a cake. You have to have all the ingredients in the right proportion. I could go and buy one of the islands in the Bahamas and turn it into my personal fiefdom, but I am much more interested in trying to build and create a new company. No, I never give up. I'd have to be dead or completely incapacitated. The idea of lying on a beach as my main thing just sounds like the worst. It sounds horrible to me. I would go bonkers. I'd have to be on some serious drugs, and I'd be super duper bored. I like high intensity. Any product that needs a manual to work is broken. I'm not trying to be anyone's savior. I'm just trying to think about the future and not be sad. When you struggle with a problem, that's when you understand it. When I was a child, there was only one thing I said. I never wanted to be alone. That's what I would say. Some people don't like change, but you need to embrace change if the alternative is disaster. I think we have a duty to maintain the light of consciousness, to make sure it continues into the future. What I'm trying to do is maximize the probability of the future being better. My proceeds from the PayPal acquisition were $180 million. I put $100 million into SpaceX, $70 million into Tesla, and $10 million in Solar City. I had to borrow money for rent. I could either watch it happen or be part of it. My children didn't choose to be born. I chose to have children. They owe me nothing. I owe them everything. You should take the approach that you're wrong. Your goal is to be less wrong. With artificial intelligence, we are summoning a demon. If you're not concerned about AI safety, you should be. Vastly more risk than North Korea. Funded by the government just means funded by the people. Government, by the way, has no money. It only takes money from the people. Sometimes people forget that's really what occurs. America is the spirit of human exploration distilled. Patience is a virtue, and I'm learning patience. It's a tough lesson. I think it's important to have a feedback loop where you're constantly thinking about what you've done and how you could do it better. Most people can learn a lot more than they think they can. They sell themselves short without trying. You get paid in direct proportion to the difficulty of problems you solve. Engineering is the closest thing to magic that exists in the world. Don't confuse schooling with education. I didn't go to Harvard, but people that worked for me did. One of the biggest mistakes was trying to automate things that are super easy for a person to do, but super hard for a robot to do. Constantly seek criticism. A well-thought-out critique of what you're doing is as valuable as gold. Constantly think about how you could do things better. Persistence is very important. You should not give up unless you are forced to give up. The first step is to establish that something is possible, then probability will occur. Life is too short for long-term grudges. If you need inspiration, don't do it. Failure is an option here. If things are not failing, you are not innovating enough. They were building a Ferrari for every launch, when it was possible that a Honda Accord might do the trick. When something is important enough, you do it even if the odds are not in your favor. You need to live in a dome initially, but over time you could terraform Mars to look like Earth and eventually walk around outside without anything on. So it's a fixer-upper of a planet. People should pursue what they're passionate about. It will make them happier than pretty much anything else. Science is discovering the essential truth about what exists in the universe. Engineering is about creating things that never existed. I would like to die on Mars, just not on impact. For me, it was never about money, but solving problems for the future of humanity. If you buy a ticket to hell, It isn't fair to blame hell. You want to do things you're passionate about, but also are useful to other people. Every person in your company is a vector. Your progress is determined by the sum of all vectors. The biggest mistake in general I've made is to put too much of weight on someone's talent and not enough on their personality. And I've made that mistake several times. I think it actually matters whether somebody has a good heart. It really does. I've made the mistake of thinking that it's sometimes just about the brain. I was raised by books, and then my parents. If you get up in the morning and think the future is going to be better, it is a bright day. Otherwise, it's not. I take the position that I'm always to some degree wrong, and the aspiration is to be less wrong. My motivation for all my companies has been to involve in something I thought would have a significant impact on the world. I think that's the single best piece of advice. Constantly think about how you can be doing things better and questioning yourself. In terms of the internet, it's like humanity acquiring a collective nervous system, whereas previously we were more like a collection of cells that communicated by diffusion. With the advent of the internet, it was suddenly like we got a nervous system. It's a hugely impactful thing. I really like computer games, but then if I made really great computer games, how much effect would that have on the world? When I was a little kid, I was really scared of the dark, but then I came to understand dark just means the absence of photons in the visible wavelength, 400 to 700 nanometers. Then I thought, well, it's really silly to be afraid of a lack of photons. Then I wasn't afraid of the dark anymore after that. Working hard to make useful products and services for your fellow humans is deeply morally good. I came to the conclusion that we should aspire to increase the scope and scale of human consciousness in order to better understand what questions to ask. Really, the only thing that makes sense is to strive for greater collective enlightenment. Whatever area you get into, given that even if you're the best of the best, there's always a chance of failure. So I think it's important that you really like what you're doing. If you don't like it, life is too short. And also, if you like what you're doing, you think about it even when you're not working. And it's something your mind is drawn to. And if you don't like it, you just really can't make it work, I think. Life needs to be more than just solving problems every day. You need to wake up and be excited about the future. I wonder how many dead one-planet civilizations are out there in the cosmos that never made it to other planet and ultimately extinguished themselves or were destroyed by external factors. Probably a few. I think that if people are concerned about volatility, they should definitely not buy our stock. I'm not here to convince you to buy stock. Do not buy it if volatility is scary. There you go. Education is basically downloading data and algorithms into your brain. Never chase the next hot thing. Stop trying to chase the wave. You will never catch it. You will, for the most part, find out about that stuff too late. Instead, do what you're really passionate about, what you really love. That will position you before the wave even hits, and you will find out about whatever it is before the wave starts, before it gets hot, and that is how you take advantage. With automation comes abundance. There have to be reasons that you get up in the morning and you want to live. Why do you want to live? What's the point? What inspires you? What is it you love about the future? Buy and hold stock in companies where you love the product roadmap, sell where you don't. Excessive use of made-up acronyms such as significant impediment to communicate. No one can actually remember all these acronyms, and people don't want to seem dumb in a meeting, so they just sit there in ignorance. This is particularly tough on new employees. When something is important enough, you should try, even if the probable outcome is failure. If you punish people too much for failure, then they will respond accordingly, and the innovations you will get will be very incremental. Nobody's going to try anything bold for fear of getting fired or punished in some way. The risk-reward must be balanced in favor of making bold moves. You shouldn't do things differently just because they're different. They need to be better. Being an entrepreneur is like eating glass and staring into the abyss of death. I do think there's a lot of potential if you have a compelling product and people are willing to pay a premium for that. I think that is what Apple has shown. You can buy a much cheaper cell phone or laptop, but Apple's product is so much better than the alternative. And people are willing to pay that premium. Don't delude yourself into thinking something's working when it's not, or you're gonna get fixated on a bad solution. Starting and growing a business is as much about innovation, drive, and determination of the people behind it, as well as the product they sell. As much as possible, avoid hiring MBAs. MBA programs don't teach people how to create companies. There are really two things that have to occur in order for a new technology to be affordable to the mass market. One is you need economies of scale. The other is you need to iterate on the design. You need to go through a few versions. What makes innovative thinking happen? I think it's really a mindset. You have to decide. A company is a group organized to create a product or service, and it is only as good as its people, and how excited they are about creating. I do want to recognize a ton of super talented people. I just happen to be the face of the companies. If something has to be designed and invented, and you have to figure out how to ensure the value of the thing you create is greater than the cost of the inputs, then that is probably my core skill. Really paying attention to negative feedback and solicit it, particularly from friends. Hardly anyone does that, and it's incredibly helpful. I don't think it's a good idea to plan to sell a company. I've actually not read any books on time management. I would just question things. It would infuriate my parents that I wouldn't just believe them when they said something, because I'd ask them the why. And then I'd consider whether that response made sense given everything else I knew. I always invest my money in the companies that I create. I don't believe in the whole thing of just using other people's money. I don't think that's right. I'm not going to ask other people to invest in something if I'm not prepared to do so myself. It's okay to have your eggs in one basket, as long as you control what happens to that basket. When Henry Ford made cheap, reliable cars, people said, "Nah, what's wrong with a horse?" That was a huge bet he made, and it worked. I don't spend my time pontificating about high-concept things. I spend my time solving engineering and manufacturing problems. People work better when they know what the goal is and why. It is important that people look forward to coming to work in the morning and enjoy working. When somebody has a breakthrough innovation, it is rarely one little thing. Very rarely it is one little thing. It is a whole bunch of things that collectively amount to a huge innovation. Talent is extremely important. It's like a sports team. The team that has the best individual player will often win. But then there's a multiplier from how these players work together and the strategy they employ. I always have optimism, but I'm a realist. It was not with the expectation of great success that I started Tesla or SpaceX. It's just that I thought they were important enough to do anyway. You have to say, well, why did it succeed where others did not? I'm interested in new things that change the world or that affect the future, and wondrous new technologies where you see it and you're like, wow, how did that even happen? How is that possible? If you're the co-founder or CEO, you have to do all kinds of tasks you may not want to do. If you don't do your chores, the company won't succeed. No task is too menial. It's important to like the people you work with. Otherwise, life and your job is going to be quite miserable. It's a mistake to hire a huge number of people to get a complicated job done. I say something, and then it usually happens. Maybe not on schedule, but it usually happens. I wouldn't say I have a lack of fear. In fact, I'd say my fear emotion to be less because it's very distracting and fries my nervous system. Your will is the most accurate way to predict the future. Work hard, like every waking hour. That's the thing I would say if you are particularly starting a company.